Welcome to the Office 365 Performance Management course on Microsoft Virtual Academy. This is Module 1, it's the first module, and this module is an overview of performance management, and also we'll be talking about the modules that are coming up in this course. My name is Paul Andrew. I work on the Office 365 team, and I'm a technical product manager. And I'm here today with Josh Marr. Josh, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Josh Marr, a senior content developer with Office 365. I focus on improving the deployment experience for Office 365.
All right, so let's get right into Module 1. In Module 1, what we want to do here is talk about performance management at a high level. We want to make sure that if this is a new area for you, or if you've just had a performance issue that you've come across with a deployment, that this can give you some information about what to expect, what kind of things to look for, what is troubleshooting and what is capacity planning. So, for our agenda for this module, we're going to spend some time just talking about what is performance management and also what is it not, what are we not talking about. Then we're going to go through the course outline. There are 11 modules in this course, and so we'll talk about what you should expect from each of those modules. The modules are at a more technical depth than this introduction will be. We've deliberately kept this introduction at a high level so that it can give you an idea of what kind of things you're talking about, why you even need to be concerned about performance management with Office 365, for example. And then after we've talked through the modules, we'll talk a little bit at a high level about what are the different aspects of performance management and what can you expect and what can you do to improve performance. All right, so let's get right into it. What is performance management?
Yeah, so what is performance management? That's always a good question.
Absolutely.
Many customers aren't sure what performance management really means. When they think about it, they have a person at their on-site, an end user who may have a specific performance problem. Maybe a file takes too long to sync, or a page is taking too long to load, right. And they don't understand what that means in relation to performance management for all of Office 365. So understanding when something is taking too long for just a single user, and when something is affecting all of the people who are accessing one of those critical workloads for Office 365. It's an important difference between a small problem and really a performance management problem.
Yeah, oftentimes when we hear about a performance problem, some users have done things that are taking longer than they think they should. So it's important to have an idea of what expected performance is for different end user operations. I know we do hear occasionally from users or customers who actually have great performance and they want it to be even better. Their expectations are even higher than the best performance that you might expect out of an internet-based solution, something running over the web.
Do we have a number that we publish publicly that says this is what performance customers should experience?
And so it kind of depends on what is the operation that the user is trying to do, depending on how long it should take. Office 365 has servers running SharePoint Online for site storage and document storage. It has servers for Exchange Online, which are, of course, for email. And we also have servers for Lync Online and Yammer and various other services. So we actually have a lot of different connections between end user applications and our servers. And they are they're all connected over the internet, but they're not directly impacted by each other. So if you're connecting from a client machine to a particular server, and you see a performance issue with some operation you're doing there, that doesn't mean that other operations are going to be impacted by whatever it is that is causing that. It might simply be a bottleneck on your customer network that's inside of your building. That might be where the bottleneck is, but quite often it is not. So it's important to understand, well, what is the operation you're trying to do? And is that operation dependent on the file size? Is it purely a factor of the file's really big, so it's going to take a long time to come down, and that's dependent on the bandwidth that you have. So it's kind of a tricky question, Josh,
right.
to be able to say that.
It sounds like Like it would also depend on where the customer's connecting from. If they're on their existing network or if they're traveling, maybe in a hotel or something.
Yep.
It might be a large impact.
Yeah, in general, we need to have different expectations of performance from hotel networks than from a corporate network. Inside of office buildings, companies will do a lot of work to make sure that there's good internet performance. Hotel chains don't always do that for their guests, or airport Wi-Fi might be another example of that. Certainly, performance with a cell phone connection is going to be different than performance on a corporate network as well.
And I think to some extent, just the fact that it's a SaaS-based operation where it's a client connecting to a server where the customer's private data is stored, it's going to be different than a customer just browsing a web page where the page has been cached all over the internet. If it's their private data isn't cached all over the internet. And so there's a different level of connectivity, a different level of performance expectation, or performance that should be expected when making that kind of connection.
Yeah, there's another difference, of course, between accessing websites and connecting to SaaS applications. SaaS applications like Office 365 typically have long-lived connections. Your email is updated all the time. Your files are synchronizing all the time. And what that means is it's very different from a transient web browser experience where you go to a web page, you look at the page, and then you're done. Your browser doesn't have to be connected all the time you're looking at the page. It stops doing that. So there are a variety of differences that make SaaS applications different, Office 365 different to web browser and other internet connections. There are other differences which make performance more optimal. So we do a lot of offline caching in our clients, which means despite the fact that you may be offline or using a cell phone, or we talked about internet over Wi-Fi at an airport as an example, despite the fact that you're on these low connection speed internet connections, because we do these things offline, we synchronize and you can work offline, that doesn't necessarily have to give you bad performance. So expected performance, I mean, we talked about this quite a lot. Expected performance is something that you need to manage, you need to understand, and how should it be expected for a SaaS application like Office 365. I love this next line, Josh.
Yes, why doesn't the service just work?
Well,
it seems like it should, right?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this quite a lot. Office 365 has users with running client applications, and it has servers in our data center. But there's actually a lot of other things in between that. And Microsoft obviously runs the data centers. We run a global network. We don't have control over a lot of the other components that are between the data center and the server and the customer. And so we can't make everything just work.
Well, what do we do in our data centers? I'm sure we do a lot in our data centers to impact performance. Do we have people running around fixing performance problems all day, or what does that look like?
Well, I'll tell you one thing we do, Josh, is we run a DevOps model in Office 365, and that means the same people who write the code actually operate the data centers as well. When I say operate the data centers, these are the guys, they work on our server products, and they're going to get called out if there is something wrong. So they've got to fix things, make sure they work if there is a service impacting event. So they work hard to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen, right? You don't want to be called out in the middle of the night to repair a data center. So there's a lot of work that goes on. There's a lot of redundancy in our systems, and a lot of excess capacity that can be used for redundancy as a result of that.
So we are doing all of what we can do, from when we write the code to when we put it on the servers to when we publish it to the internet and start accepting customer data into those data centers. We have a lot of processes that are in flight, that are happening all the time to affect that performance. All of those other things you talked about, the internet, the customer data connections, all of those other pieces, those are some of the things that we can't affect with our our data center and our developers?
Well, we can't directly. We can't with our DevOps model or our service teams or our guys on call, but we can by helping to teach people about what's involved. So all of those other things we're going to be talking about throughout this course. And we'll actually give you an overview, a high-level overview of some of those things now. Basically all of the other things are under the control of the end user or the customer. The choices and the potential troubleshooting and capacity planning is all things that you can impact and you can change the performance of. So everything that's outside of our DevOps control we can teach you about, and you can learn about what may need to be done.
Excellent. Well, why don't we jump into what some of those things are that we're going to talk about in the whole course?
Right. So we're going to talk about capacity planning and troubleshooting, and we're going to talk about those a little bit now. With great capacity planning, you should not expect to have performance issues with Office 365. There's tons of stuff you can do to prepare for working with Office 365 and making sure your networking equipment and your servers and your clients are ready to go, ready for the number of users that you have, and ready to connect to Office 365. If, however, capacity planning is not sufficient, we're going to talk about troubleshooting and what you can do to take a look at, well, I'm not getting the performance I want, what can I do to improve that, and what does that look like? We hear from people doing troubleshooting that most problems with performance can be resolved by going and looking at it from the customer end. So starting from the customer end and working towards the Microsoft network, towards the data center. We, of course, are always looking at performance on the server side. We have people dedicated specifically to performance, and of course we have our DevOps model. All right, so we're going to look at the course outline now. And so these are the modules that we have in this course. So you can see the 11 modules there, Josh, and you can see the name of the co-host who will be joining me for each of these. Josh, your name appears in quite a few of these.
Yes, absolutely. It's a good list of modules to cover. Obviously we're in this one now, the course introduction.
Wow, module 1. So what's going to be in module 1? No, wait, we talked about that already.
Yes, we already talked about it.
All right.
So that's actually module number 2 with Alice Appleton. I'm not in that particular module, so do you want to talk a little bit about what's in it?
Yeah, so module 2, Alice is going to be here, and we'll be talking about the Microsoft data centers and what's in those data centers, and how we manage the performance in those. Also, how we have connections between those data centers. You'll hear us talk about the connections between our data centers and the Microsoft network throughout the course, but specifically in that module, we'll be talking about just a whole lot of different things about how they are put together. And then module 3, we start on our planning modules. So you can see really we spend a lot of time on planning, and then we spend a lot of time on troubleshooting. And Josh, you're in the first of the planning modules, module 3. Tell us about that.
Yes, absolutely. So the first planning module, module 3, we're talking about Exchange Online, and specifically we're talking about planning for capacity with Exchange Online. So we're going to look at kind of the academic view of what does capacity planning look like for Exchange Online. We'll take a look at a calculator that can help with that planning, and we'll kind of review some of the throttling and other things that will come into a customer will need to account for when they're talking about the capacity planning for Exchange. Module 4, very similar to Module 3, except for we're talking about Lync Online. And again, we're going to demo a calculator that customers can use to evaluate what capacity may look like, really from a theoretical academic view. And we're going to do the same in Module 5, and you'll bring in Zach Rosenfeld.
Yeah, we'll have Zach here. Zach is from the SharePoint performance team, and he has a wealth of experience doing this, and so he's going to be talking about how to do capacity planning for SharePoint. We have another one of these Excel calculators that we'll look at about how you can plan the bandwidth there. And so that will round out the, the academic side of planning, which of course we also, Josh, we have documented on TechNet, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. All of the things that we're going to talk about in modules 3, 4, and 5 are all documented on TechNet. So the things that we talk about, customers can access today there, and we'll have some links available on the course description as well.
Great. So module 6, excuse me, we're going to have Ed Fisher with us. Ed is a senior consultant in America's Cloud Services, which is the group in Microsoft that does deployments for Office 365 around North America. So Ed has a wealth of experience just deploying Office 365 with our largest customers. And so Ed brings some great best practices. He's going to be talking about a specific model that he uses, which is documented, of course, in the modules and the TechNet guidance that Josh was talking about. But he uses this baselining model, which is essentially looking at, well, how much data do you use now with the services you use now, and how can we extrapolate to what you're likely to use when you deploy Office 365. And if you don't have that now, you can run a pilot, and if you can look at the amount of data that or bandwidth that you need for the pilot, and then extrapolate that to what you'll need for full production.
So this is really moving from academic to real world. What will it look like in that customer's environment? Much further beyond the academic or theoretical possibilities.
Right. Yeah, Ed is all about, Ed came off, Ed is coming off customer deployments to present here. And it's all about what he actually has to do to make sure that the customers are ready for when they deploy Office 365. And it's not just ready in terms of do you have enough bandwidth capacity to the internet, but it's also all of the equipment that connects to the internet, thinking about transition from on-premises to the internet, and there's just a lot of detail there. Ed's also going to bring some real world examples, and he'll be talking about some example projects that he's been through and what he had to do with customers in order to get them ready for connecting to Office 365. Again, different from web browsing, moving to a SaaS application.
Excellent. And then I come back for Module 8, talk a little bit about the whitelisting and firewall filtering. So really we're moving from the planning component into the real operational component. If customers are already filtering outbound connectivity to the internet, this module is important. If they are not filtering outbound connections to the internet, this module, you can not worry about it all that much, but it's really critical for folks who are doing whitelisting today.
Yeah, I guess there's a portion of customers who choose to firewall employees or users' connections to the internet and block certain sites. And so that's important for those customers. Lots of people don't do that, of course. So modules 9 and 10 have Paul Collinge, who is a senior premier field engineer with Microsoft in the UK. And Paul actually spends a lot of time helping customers who find they have a performance issue of some kind with Office 365. So his days are spent at customer sites, hands-on, running tests and looking for root cause for performance issues, looking for bottlenecks, and providing guidance for those customers about how to resolve their problems. So this is the second and the other major part of this course, which is about troubleshooting. So we have two modules here. We have one module on the processes used and some of the tools that are used for doing troubleshooting. And then we have a second module where Paul is literally going to go through his top 10 or so tests that he runs to gather information about what might be causing the performance bottleneck that customers are experiencing. And then the last one, Module 11, Troubleshooting SharePoint Online Customizations. Phil Newman is going to be here and he'll be talking about a particular area of performance where a SharePoint site has some customizations on it and how you can improve the performance or the delay which is caused by processing those customizations. So this is really, in some ways this is looking at how a SharePoint portal or site is moved from on-premises to the cloud and the different things that you have to look at to make sure that it performs well. In other ways, it's looking at how you have to compare an uncustomized SharePoint page, one that we've optimized and that we've made perform as well as it can, to a page which has customizations. It has additional capabilities, it has additional look and feel, which may mean that it takes longer to load. So he's got some great feedback about how to go about doing that right. All right, so that is our quick walk through the course, the 11 modules. So we want to talk about performance management just at a high level in this module and give you an idea about what we mean. And you know, the reason that we do this, Josh, is when customers do have a performance issue, I hear about them a lot because of the work that I'm involved in.
Yes.
But it's sometimes difficult to get past there's an Office 365 performance issue, and it's very hard to know what to do. There's kind of a I know from a customer's point of view, they see something that's not performing as they'd expect, and it's Office 365, whether it be the client or a web part of Office 365, whatever part it is, and they go, hey, that's Office 365 and it's not performing. I want Microsoft to do something about it. It's natural to think that, right?
Yeah.
That Microsoft is going to take care of it and pick up the slack of whatever that performance issue is.
Yeah, it's much easier to not go through the steps to pinpoint some of those issues or work through the repro of the issues, considering it is an Office 365 problem.
Yeah.
Without looking at the whole stream of problems that are that things that could be a problem in the connection.
So I guess we're here to say it's natural to assume that and expect that Microsoft has visibility and control over everything Office 365. But we're here to tell you today that we can't just look at a dashboard and say, oh yeah, that customer's having a performance issue and change a switch and resolve it. So let's take a look at this diagram that we have of how customers connect to Office 365. We sort of hinted at this earlier, that yeah, Microsoft builds the data centers and the servers, or the server workloads. We call the SharePoint Online and Exchange Online and Lync Online, etc. We call them workloads. We own that, and we manage that with our devs. We also own and manage the Microsoft network. We have, of course, one of the top 3 networks in the world connecting our data centers and also connecting our data centers to the internet.
So when you say the top 3 networks in the world,
yep,
is this in comparison to whom?
Well, so if you think about the internet for a minute, if you think about the internet is made up of a lot of independent networks that are connected together. Many of them are fiber optic cable connections, and they're connected together in the back of switches and routers. And so, Microsoft has some component of that. We have a network which is all across the world and connects into the internet. Other companies have networks which are part of the internet and connect into the network. And there's also telcos who have networks as well. If you look at all of those networks, and this data is typically not public, so we don't know exactly how much data goes into and out of each network or how many miles of cable there are, but there are analyst firms that look at how much data goes into and out of networks, and they approximate stuff, and Microsoft is one of the top 3. And there are 3 major networks in the world. The 4th, 5th, and the others are smaller. So we connect our data centers with that network all across the world, across the oceans, fiber optic cable everywhere. And we also connect in around about 23 countries. We have connections to different internet service providers. We connect to actually about 2,000 internet service providers from this network. So internet peering, so go ahead, John.
Oh, yeah. So do we rely on other people to help extend that network beyond our existing network?
Absolutely. And of course, the implicit question there also is, can you connect directly to the network? You can't connect directly to that network. That network is connected into the internet at peering points. And when we're talking about internet peering, that's the process by which the Microsoft network is connected to another network. And we have an agreement. There's typically a written agreement. And then there's an agreement at the network layer of, well, what data am I going to transfer across this network? So Microsoft carries data for our customers connecting to Microsoft services. And this includes Microsoft commercial services like Office 365 and Azure. It also includes consumer services such as the Bing search engine engine, and our live mail offering and other things like that. And so at each of those peering points, if there is data from an internet service provider for a Microsoft data center, then Microsoft will carry it over our network.
So what we've described so far, if we look back at the diagram, is really the Office 365 cloud in the upper left, and we've talked through the first 3 boxes on the left-hand side of the screen.
Right.
The Microsoft network, the edge nodes, and the peering network, or the peering and routing connections that customers' networks may connect into. So the last pieces really are the content delivery network, the customer internet connection, and then the place where all of the performance problems surface are the client applications.
Client applications, right. Yeah, so we have, of course, web client applications and rich client applications that run on Windows and other operating systems and on mobile devices. And so making sure they're configured correctly is part of the performance discussion. Making sure the internet connection the customers have at each of their locations is configured correctly and has appropriate scale and size. Making sure that you are using content delivery networks. Content delivery networks is a network of cache servers which cache static files all over the world. Microsoft has one, and we also use third-party content delivery networks for components of Office 365. So there's a lot to this, Josh.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. Well, and it sounds like when a customer thinks about performance management, they should start with capacity planning, starting from the rich application side, and then looking at the customer internet connection and whether or not they're using those content delivery networks.
Right. And so customers, you should assume Microsoft is working on the left-hand side of this that diagram, and we are working to improve the performance every day in there. And if you're seeing a performance issue with a particular user at a particular location, start looking at the right-hand side of that diagram. Because, you know, if there's a performance issue connecting from the client to the server, it could be anywhere in that connection. And, you know, the reverse is true as well. If you want to improve performance, you can improve it at any one of these nodes or these major items connected between the client and the server. So, you know, even if you have, I don't know, a network peering issue, maybe from the box in the middle there, it's possible that you can work on the internet connection to your local sites and improve the performance such that the peering issue is no longer relevant and doesn't matter. And you can improve the performance such that your users are satisfied and they're getting the performance they need without having to go and figure out how do you fix that peering issue and what's behind that. Yeah, you can fix a peering issue as well. It's probably going to take more time because there's more people involved. You've got to talk with ISPs and figure out where that is at. Then, if you can go and fix an internet connection issue that's on your site where you can literally go and touch the box and replace it or reconfigure it or whatever it is that you need to do.
Well, so why don't we talk a little bit more about what those high-level things are that they can plan for with the capacity.
Right. So let's talk about capacity planning. And so if you'll remember, we're going to do capacity planning and then we're going to do, troubleshooting. So the happy path is we do capacity planning, and we've got a few terms here to talk about.
Yes.
In terms of capacity planning.
Internet bandwidth headroom. It kind of sounds ominous, I guess. Maybe confusing if you're not a network geek. But really what we're talking about with internet bandwidth headroom is the amount of capacity left on your internet connection that Office 365 can use. So all customers that have an internet connection have some amount of traffic going over that internet connection, and they may use it a lot. That internet connection may be utilized 99% or maybe utilized 20%. And whatever's left over, that 1% or the 80%, that's the headroom that's available. So understanding how much headroom is available for Office 365, and then understanding how much of that headroom Office 365 is going to use is an important exercise. And so we talk about that from an academic perspective with the calculators, and then from a practical perspective with the baselining in the later modules.
So headroom is a thing that you can literally go and get off a piece of networking equipment in the logs. You can look and say, well, what's the percentage of headroom that you have? 20% would be a great amount of headroom to have for a system that's ongoing and working. But you literally need to calculate the bandwidth headroom that's going to be used by Office 365, assuming that all the rest of the bandwidth usage is going to be there. Josh, the first company that I worked at that I connected the company to the internet. We had a 64K line running about 50 kilometers. That's like 30 miles to where the internet connection point was. We didn't know anything about headroom in those days. The line was either full or it was empty. There was either someone using it, in which case it was done, it was overloaded,
right,
or no one was using it, in which case it wasn't overloaded. But nowadays, with much larger internet connections and, of course, lots and lots of people using single internet connections, typically and I'm going to draw a graph here, the bandwidth utilization goes something like this. It's not bam, up to the top and then down to the bottom. And you're not either using it or you're not using it there.
And when customers are using just transient web browsing versus a SaaS service, they're going to affect that headroom or the bandwidth utilization in much different ways. And so understanding the difference between just going to msn.com or going to office365.com and actually accessing real customer data, there's going to be a different usage profile. So understanding kind of the difference between those two and what the effect's going to be is also important.
Right, so capacity planning is largely about figuring out that usage profile for Office 365 and how that changes from what you had before, and thinking about, does that mean I have to get more bandwidth, or does that mean that I have to do something else with the equipment that I've got right now?
Well, the other piece really is the client device readiness. And so what we're really talking about there is what the devices are, how they're configured. Or do they have the latest patches? Are they configured to cache the data locally? Are they using Outlook cache mode? Is the OneDrive client installed? Are they able to get that data cached locally to help the client experience of performance be improved?
Yeah, and I think to summarize that, I think what we're really saying is you've got to have the latest clients, you've got to have the latest Outlook and the latest OneDrive for Business in order to take advantage of just a ton of work that we've done, which subtly will improve performance and make sure that you're getting the best performance connecting to Office 365 that you can. If you're using an old, Office 2007 clients, we didn't have Office 365 back then, so your mileage may vary.
That's right. We've planned how to use Office 365 into our latest clients,
yep.
and that's really the key point there.
So let's talk about egress points. Internet egress points is our next point here. An internet egress point is simply, if you have a large company, it is likely that you have either multiple offices or a private network that connects multiple offices and users at different locations. And so you may have an internet egress point just at one of those offices, in which case the traffic goes from all the offices to your internet egress point and then out. Or you may have multiple internet egress points at each of your offices for use by users at those offices. They may even be offices in different countries with different internet egress points. And managing those egress points in terms of how you connect to the internet, how you connect to Office 365 is important to consider.
Absolutely. Well, and understanding that performance may be different for different egress points, and understanding that they may be connecting to different parts of the network, right. That's going to change a lot of what's going to happen.
Yeah, we have optimizations for things like Outlook web apps, which, depending on whereabouts on the internet you're connecting from, you'll connect to different parts of Microsoft data centers. And so this is impacted by where your internet egress point is. There's a few configuration things that you have to watch for there.
Well, similarly, the content delivery networks, if customers are not able to access the content delivery networks, the things that they're going to download from Office 365 have to go all the way back to the Office 365 data center instead of get them from the cached copy on the content delivery network.
And both of these egress points and CDNs are impacted by a thing called DNS. And We do find a lot of times DNS configuration for customers with multiple internet egress points is not always optimal for having great performance with Office 365. So there's very often work to do there.
Well, and I think another component really is when we roll out new features to Office 365, we're constantly improving it and adding new functionality for customers so that they can improve their productivity. Things like we recently launched Delve, and we recently launched Sway. Both will affect the customers' usage of Office 365.
Right.
And so understanding that how that usage evolves is important.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I think they're great new features. I think they're both going to generate a lot more content development, which is going to was going to equivalently increase the amount of bandwidth that customers need. All right, so we talked about capacity planning. I hope you've got an idea for what we mean by capacity planning, getting ready for your internet connection and your users' connectivity and your applications and all that stuff for connecting to Office 365. So now let's talk about troubleshooting. And so this will be the second part of the course and the later modules of when performance problems occur, what do you do? And one of the things I want to talk about at the start of this slide is what is not a performance problem. Because certainly working in the space, I can tell you, yeah, that's a performance problem, you've got to do something about that, or no, this is not a performance problem. But if you're not familiar with the space of what is performance, sometimes people will look at something that we use this term of a service impacting event, which means something's gone wrong and something has stopped working as it should have. And yeah, you could say that it's not performing as well as it used to, but typically it's not working at all. And so we don't really consider that needing the same sort of troubleshooting as a performance problem. Actually, service impacting events are typically much easier to find a root cause for and figure out what's wrong, because something's just broken, and you get to a point, oh, that's actually broken there. Where performance issue really means, yeah, everything's working as it's supposed to, but somewhere along the line, something's a little bit slower than what you need, or it's a little bit overloaded, and so it's much more difficult to troubleshoot, and that's what we're talking about with performance troubleshooting.
So just by way of an example, email not being able to send or receive for a customer for all of a data center would be a service impacting event. But email just sending or receiving slowly may not be a service impacting event, and that may just be a performance problem.
Right. And of course, starting with, okay, your email's slow. Let's take a look at that. Why is it slow? Under what circumstances is it slow? Another thing that's not really considered a performance problem is if the problem can't be reproduced. If it just happens once and then it stops happening. If it's happened in the past, but it's not happening anymore. It's very difficult to troubleshoot performance problems. So if it's no longer happening, if it's no longer giving you grief and performing inadequately, it's not something that realistically can be troubleshooted and improved on. So this is what troubleshooting is, what performance management is not. Let's talk about what it is. So what does a performance problem look like? That's a question to you, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, performance problems, they look like many different things. An IT admin or an IT pro at a customer site may see an end user have an email performance problem. They may see hear a report of a web page loading slowly for Office 365, and so they may come at that person in many different ways. And so taking a look at that holistically and understanding, is this a problem that is affecting multiple people for a particular Office 365 workload? Or is this something that is affecting all of the Office 365 workloads for many people within an organization? That's when it starts to really look like a performance problem and
right.
Not necessarily kind of a one-off thing that happened one time. So then understanding how do they go about figuring out where that performance problem lives, before that natural reaction to just call Microsoft, kicks in. There's many things they can do from that point.
Right. And my ask would be, if you're hearing about a performance problem from a user, just ask a few more questions. And those questions would be, what is the operation, the end user operation? What's the thing that you did that you saw that wasn't performing? It's likely that it's only one thing. It's less likely that it's every single thing I do connected to Office 365 is performing badly. It's more likely that it is one operation. I'm downloading a file and it takes too long, or I'm sending an email and it takes too long. What is that operation? Because that really helps in order to be able to figure out the root cause and troubleshoot it. Also, when does it happen? Does it happen only during the workday, not at night? Does it happen at home but not in the office? Does it happen only in hotels? What time of day and what location? And consequently, what kind of network are you connected to when the problem happens? Telling us that it connects from when you're connected from a cell phone is the only time that it happens really helps out. It doesn't mean you can't do that when you're connected from a cell phone, but it helps us to figure out, well, how can we show you what you can do to get great performance when you're in those circumstances? Or how can we improve the performance when you're connecting that way? So learning about that, and then secondly, being able to repro or reproduce the problem so that you can show it to someone else. At Microsoft, we won't know exactly what you're experiencing and what the performance problem is that you're seeing. So being able to reproduce it and recreate it and say, yeah, here it is. And if you look at this, you can see this takes 2 seconds and it really shouldn't take 2 seconds, or whatever that is. That's very, very helpful.
So if I'm an IT executive and in my environment, I am seeing a lot of performance problems, or I'm hearing of performance problems, what should I be thinking about to help get those problems resolved? At the end of the day, that's what I would want to have happen.
Right. And so you can learn about which is the problem. Does it affect all users at all times for a certain thing? And figure out what it's not, what things are not performing poorly. And then the second thing you got to do is you got to expect that it's going to take some troubleshooting, that somebody is going to have to either be on site doing troubleshooting or working very closely with people on site to troubleshoot from that end user location where the performance problem is happening, and run tests. Somebody's got to do the troubleshooting, run those tests, and then make a hypothesis of what they think the root cause the root cause of the performance problem is. They've got to look at the numbers and the test results that they're getting and say, oh, I think it might be this piece of equipment or that client configuration or whatever it is. And then they've got to validate and confirm that. Once they've done that, they can go and make a change. They can recommend, hey, you should upgrade your Outlook clients to the new version because that will solve this problem that you're having.
So who's doing those tests? Is it the network administrator? Is it the desktop administrator? I mean, who in the IT organization are doing all of these tests and forming the hypotheses?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. It's the troubleshooting person that you get involved. It is the IT person who comes in to do that kind of work. Once you've figured out exactly what does the problem impact, you've got to expect that you've got to have some technical support to go in and look at, okay, we've got a performance problem, we've got to spend a couple of days working on running these tests and figuring that out. It's whoever you normally use for IT outages, but it is harder work. Troubleshooting is harder than just coming in and deploying a PC or upgrading a printer and doing that kind of thing.
So maybe many different teams or different people, depending on the size of the organization and the complexity of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it could require a group of people, could require daily meetings, triaging what you found and figuring that out. It's certainly going to require people with access to the networking equipment to get data off those, to make configuration changes and such. So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
And then ultimately, what are they, if they're not able to find the problem, but they are able to repro the problem, what's really the next step from there?
Josh, you're reading the last bullet on our slide here. What is Microsoft doing about this? Yeah, you can call Microsoft support and log issues related to performance. We need to make sure that those issues are not on the customer network or on customer-owned equipment, because that would be the responsibility of whoever manages your equipment on site to do. But yes, you can absolutely log performance issues with Microsoft support and get them to help you work through them. And Microsoft, the other thing that we're alluding to here is Microsoft does have full-time teams working on performance for Office 365. We have teams in each of our workloads very concerned about this and working on this area. All right, so
excellent.
Troubleshooting.
Yeah, that sounds like it's a worthwhile effort to understand what troubleshooting looks like.
Right. Even just understanding a little bit about it, right, can really help to get some information that helps to get your problem solved faster. I know performance issues are one of those things that if you don't get started on it and you don't go deep enough on it, they can linger for a long time. Stuff's not broken, so it's hard to resolve performance issues because of the troubleshooting, and so people do tend to put them off or not apply resources. But we want to encourage you to do that and get great performance.
Excellent. Well, why don't we hit the summary?
All right, so summary, Module 1 summary. So we talked about what is performance management, and then we talked through the modules that are in this course, and we showed you our diagram of what's between the servers and the users.
There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, great. Love that diagram. And then we talked about the two main parts of performance management, which is capacity planning, what you do up front to make sure that you're ready for connecting, and then troubleshooting if something goes wrong and something's unexpected. So we've got lots more content in this course, and I hope you will join me again. I'll be with Alice Appleton in Module 2, and we'll be talking more about the Microsoft Datacenters and the Microsoft Network. Josh, I want to thank you for coming along. I hope you come back for later modules.
Yes, I'm excited to be here for the next few modules that I'm Module 3 and 4 and 8.
Great. All right, well, thanks everyone for watching today.